Stephen, welcome back to World Watchers.
Good to be with you.
Well,
hello, Stephen.
It's great.
You got me? Can you hear me?
Yo,
yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Sir. You sound good.
Great.
Last time we had you on, we
you.
broke up pretty bad, and I'm sorry about that. But it's great to have you here tonight. And so tell us a little bit about the progress that you've been having.
Well, the next step in the advocacy work, which aims to finally put the government in a position where they have to tell the people the truth about the ET presence, is the Congressional Hearing Initiative. It's a big deal. And it's only possible because of the citizen hearing on disclosure, which we held last May and filmed all 30 hours of it. As a result, we have a calling card, an unprecedented calling card. And so the question was, all right, when do we use this card? And when do I go back to on Capitol Hill for the first time in really 13 years for direct engagement of members and their staff on this issue? Right now, the game plan is February 10, 11, 12, right around there, to launch this Congressional Hearing Initiative. I was wanting to do it last November, even December, but it proved to be a good thing that we did not attempt to go ahead. We really couldn't, but it worked out fine because, as most, I think, of your listeners recall, the Congress had a nervous breakdown through all of, December, certainly, November, all of November, over the debt ceiling and the budget. So they set new dates to reconsider and go around again, and they've already passed the budget. And the debt ceiling date is for February 7. So whatever foo-fa is going to take place between the two parties on the Hill over the debt ceiling, it will be over by the 7th. There's no way they're going to go past that date. And that means things will settle down. And that's when we launch. So the timing has worked out beautifully. What we're going to do is simply this. We will ship off a complete DVD set of the proceedings, all 30 hours, 10 DVDs approximately in a nice box set. We'll ship one to every office on the Hill, all 535. Plus, we're going to send one to 100 ambassadors to the UN and 100 ambassadors to the United States. A few days after that, I'm going to be doing national media, national radio, and calling on everyone who hears my voice to send an email and multiple tweets to their two senators and congressperson, their senators, just those three, asking that they look for those DVDs and look at them, and also meet with me about congressional hearings for the witnesses ready to testify. So in the days leading up to those arriving in their offices, they will be getting all these emails and tweets, sort of letting them know these DVDs are coming. And then they'll continue to get those contacts after the DVDs have arrived, which will help to ensure that staffers in some of these offices look at some of this material. Shortly after that, I will come knocking on their door, asking for direct meetings with the appropriate staffer over those DVDs, the citizen hearing, and the fact that we want congressional hearings. PRG has identified the top committees, the appropriate committees in both the House and Senate. And so the way it's going to work is I'm going to start with only members who are on those committees. Right? I'll approach those offices, and I'll start with the multiple committees. In other words, if you are in Congress and you sit on 3 of the appropriate committees, you're going to get contacted first. And then after that, everyone who sits on 2 and then 1. And that's a lot of people. That'll keep me more than busy. I'll be contacting all those that sit on the appropriate committees and asking for a meeting. All this will be taking place through the end of February. This will all happen in a span of about 20 days. At least this initial move. And I will keep a track of every office that declines to meet. And not long after that, at some point, I will publish to the web a list of all those offices with their contact information that decline to meet, and then I'll ask once again for everyone, not just everyone, to contact those offices, not their constituent representatives, but those offices. So however many they are, 10, 15, 20, they'll start getting emails and tweets from people asking them to reconsider their decision not to meet and review that material. While all this is going on, there's going to be a continual press engagement. We will have, intent is to have our publicists working all through February, March, and April to get me on every talk show possible, and drive the issue. So it's kind of like the Congress will be sort of circled by media action and stories and tweets and emails and knocks on their door, and the whole thing will just go on in a kind of intense fashion, with the idea that at some point a few members of one of the committees are going to pressure the chair of that committee to hold a hearing for the witnesses that we have ready to go. Now, exactly how that would go down would be negotiated, but I'm just not going to settle for some show hearing with 3 witnesses coming in and just going through the motions. We're talking about witnesses, 15, 20, 25, 30 of the witnesses that, such as were presented at the citizen hearing, as well as others that are ready to testify on the Hill. And if these witnesses testify, and they will certainly be on camera, there's just no chance the media will not film every minute of this, the truth embargo is finished. There's no way it can survive it. And that's what's about to happen. All this is going to cost about $50,000, which includes all the 700 and some DVD sets with 7,500 DVDs, plus setting me up at a place near the Capitol, and other media and media promotional stuff. And we're trying to find a single backer that'll cover all this, somebody that wants to end this truth embargo as soon as possible. And we're working on that. I feel optimistic. And that's the next step, the Congressional Hearing Initiative. The goal is nothing less than disclosure next year, as early as possible.
Well, and I really hope it succeeds. And I've been telling the listeners that I think that we're getting closer to that, because, they're slowly but surely letting some cats out of the bag, like freshwater lakes that may have existed on Mars, and just little things like that I think eventually the truth is going to come out. And for you and I, we already know the truth. We're not alone. But the
truth is out there.
Yeah.
It's the government hasn't acknowledged it.
Well,
there is a difference. You know what I mean? The acknowledgement is critical to our going forward as a nation, U.S., and as well as a planet. So, and you're right, it's leaking everywhere. And in fact, there's a lot going on. We are literally seeing the early stages of what amounts to a revolution aimed directly at the massive secret empires that have been built since World War II. There have been some revolutions in smaller nations, particularly in the Balkans, from time to time, but the big ones, the big structures, which is, of course, what exists within the United States, UK, and Canada. I'll put Russia and I'll put China off to the side. This secret empire is going to be dismantled and reformed. Initially, one whistleblower, one documentary at a time, and we're seeing the early stages. Extraordinary things are happening. The NSA has been turned upside down by Edward Snowden. There are more Snowdens very likely in our future. WikiLeaks has driven several nations up the wall. Both of them have considerable more material they can put out at will. Barring some sort of assassination squads, there's really nothing much these governments can do at this point. Recently, a nice couple came forward and announced that they were the ones that burglarized the FBI office back in 1971 on the files about the FBI doing COINTELPRO against the anti-war movement and other movements. They could do this because the statute of limitations is over. The public's acceptance and understanding of such people is improving. Nevertheless, the governments are still hurting whistleblowers. They are fighting back to some degree. It's the early stages, but it is really an extraordinary time, which brings me to the key point, and something that I've said publicly many times, that the disclosure event, the acknowledgement, not only that there's an extraterrestrial presence, but that the major governments of the world have withheld that from their people for 6.5 decades. That event, in the aftermath of that event, I believe we will see the greatest era of institutional reform ever seen, in terms of the scope, the size, the breadth, the number of entities, organizations, institutions involved. It will just be extraordinary. And so what you're seeing now is just a little taste of that. But if you think that Eric Snowden and Bradley Manning and Julian Assange are just too much, right? That's just too much for the governments to have to put up with, and it's just not fair. Let me tell you, after disclosure, it's going to be raining Edward Snowden's, Julian Assange's, and others.
Well, Steve,
but I'm talking about bloodless revolution, right? I'm talking about an era of reform where the public finally says, look, we want to fix this stuff. We're no longer just going to listen to your lies. We're not going to go along with it anymore. You're going to reform. You're going to get transparent. We'll reconstruct things so we can have these kinds of services, intelligence, operations, and so forth, with proper oversight and reasonable limits. That is what I think could happen post-disclosure. And that's just one of many massive potential implications of this, quote, simple little event of truth-telling.
I love the timing of this, because I had done a video with Alfred Weber. Actually, there's two of them that have the same information. Based on what I can get out of the biblical prophecies and the timing of the events we see going on in the world, I would expect that, 2015, you're going to have full disclosure, and it'll be toward the spring, maybe second quarter, because by fourth quarter, we're going to have physical beings here. They're not going to be able to hold disclosure back after that. I think we're actually going to have some sort of a full-blown alien invasion, so to speak, by the fourth quarter of 2015.
I can't speak to that. That's not my area. What ETs and other beings are going to do is simply their prerogative. I don't have any sense of that. I can only address what we can do terrestrially. In terms of that, we need, and I want disclosure now, this year, as soon as possible. In fact, I've made this case many times, it's imperative that we have an orderly, appropriate disclosure process occur where governments tell the truth and regain the trust, or begin to regain the trust of the people, before any kind of extraordinary events involving ETs occur on this planet in the open. Because if we don't have that disclosure event first, I can assure you such events will be extremely upsetting, disruptive, and unnecessarily damaging to the social contracts.
I would agree. I would agree whole-souled. I've said this time and time again, nothing would change this world quicker. And this is based on what Reagan said. How quickly we would put our differences aside if we were facing an alien threat from outside this planet, or outside.
Yeah, and that's old world thinking. I think what the question that I would have posed to him, and he'd be willing to take a question on this, or any of his aides, or any of the chiefs of staff at the time, which of course would never accept any questions on this subject, and that's still the case, what's your view about how the world would react if they learned that there was an alien presence that wasn't threatening?
Yeah, well, you see,
what difference would it make? I mean,
it's all how it's positioned and spun.
But the point I'm making is, if government announces there's an extraterrestrial presence here, but there's no immediate threat, are people just going to say, well, there's no threat. Let's have some more wars. Let's build some more nukes. Let's pollute the oceans. Let's just continue acting as we have, because there's aliens here, but they're not threatening. So Reagan but in the context of what the Reagan's time, and the fact that he was being sold on the SDI program heavily by the military, I mean, they were just pushing it at him really hard. It sort of made sense, but there is no indication whatsoever that statement of, quote, a possible alien threat was in fact based on any information of any substance that Reagan might have had in his head. This was just Ronnie being Ronnie. But he did do something important there. He raised it several times, and that's when it comes out of a president's mouth, that's very important. But again, it was back then. This is now 2013. We know a lot more. We're more sophisticated. The issue isn't so much threat as it is engagement and open contact, which is a game changer in and of itself. We have got to stop thinking in terms of threats everywhere, enemies. This is what has been undermining the human progress and damaging not only society but the biosphere itself for 10,000 years, and we've just got to move past it unless we have incontrovertible information and evidence that there is in fact a threat. But government by boogeyman is old paradigm, needs to go.
Well, I agree, and I want to point out one thing which I believe was in the last, I know it was in the disclosure, the press club disclosure 2 years ago, where they had witnesses was from the missile base in South Dakota that said, hey, a UFO showed up and disarmed their missiles, but shut them all. 17 out of 21 missiles or something like that.
All the missiles shut down.
All the missiles. So what would that tell you? Go ahead and try to fire those suckers. You know, go ahead.
Well, it obviously is, you know, open to interpretation, and different people have had different views about it. I talked to some of the witnesses who were actually there, and they've testified at the congressional hearing on disclosure. What is known is that not just once, twice, but a number of times, mostly in the 60s, some 70s, but possibly even recently, they have turned their missiles off, and then we turn them back on. That's what's known. They didn't melt them down. They didn't destroy them. They didn't attach a letter to the act saying, no, here's what's going to happen, or this is what we think. They simply did that. So in the context of everything else that's going on, I think the message I would take from it is we're just letting you know how foolish your actions are in the light of the larger picture, which includes civilizations and beings more advanced than you. Your weapons, in light of the larger picture, are nothing but a vast waste of money. And, of course, a potential destroyer of your civilization, polluter of your environment, and so forth and so forth and so forth. Notice that they turn the missiles off. They don't go around turning on nuclear reactors off, which they could do as well. Be more dangerous, probably. So, but that's one interpretation. Others, certainly the military viewed it as a threat. Though, interestingly enough, even though if they viewed it as a threat, they never acknowledged it, lied about it, never in any way engaged the public about it, because obviously it involved ETs, and they're not allowed to talk about ETs. So, this is another example of how tied up in knots they are. And if I were the military and intelligence community, particularly the military community, going back to the 70s, 60s when this was happening, I'd have a nervous breakdown. I don't know how they dealt with it, frankly. They've just been driven crazy by this, but it's their own fault. They won't trust the public. Now they don't even trust each other. The military doesn't trust the Congress. William Gates just wrote a book, blistering attack on the U.S. Congress. It just eviscerated the Congress. There's going to be more. So nobody trusts anybody. Nobody's telling the truth. This is insanity. So I say this is as insane. This the dysfunction we're seeing in government now is as insane as building those missiles in the first place. So the ETs didn't shut our government down. We do that on our own. They shut the missiles down. So these are some of the facts that are out there. But we can't interpret them more thoroughly because the government is withholding vast amounts of information that allow us to come to a more informed decision. Right? So they keep us stupid so that we don't bother them. That just makes it easier for them to make mistake after mistake after mistake without being interfered with others who might have an alternative opinion. This is no way to run a world, a planet, a nation, a military, period. And that's, again, why disclosure absolutely has to happen as soon as possible.
And I totally agree with you. Now, I got a question from one of our chat rooms here. One of the listeners asked, why would these new witnesses be any different than the last witnesses? And I guess he means, well, I guess why would they listen to these ones when they didn't listen to the last?
It's actually pretty simple. Witnesses have been coming forward for a long time.
Yeah, they have.
In ever-increasing sophistication. Just go back to 2001 and the press conference at the National Press Club. There's been several more since. I've held 5 there. Simple fact is that the press, under the truth embargo, will write it up, but no follow-up. The government will say nothing, no response, and it stops. I mean, that's how the truth embargo works. Mm-hmm. And so why this could be a sea change is that we have created a situation where we might, in fact, persuade this at least one or more committees in this Congress, which has an approval rating of 9% and is the laughingstock of the political world, that it's in their best interest to take on an issue of huge importance and get in the truth business and allow these witnesses in there. And just all they have to do is listen and ask some questions. They're not asked to give speeches about their love of ETs. That this could be a game changer for them, and they've got nowhere to go but up. Now, if that works, then what happens is these witnesses will not be speaking at a press conference of the National Press Club. They will be testifying under oath on Capitol Hill before House and Senate committees, with the whole world watching and the press filming everything. And that is the difference.
That's the game change.
That is something they cannot get away from. It will trigger a cascade of investigatory activity by the press, and the truth embargo could not even begin to sustain that kind of investigation. It would just collapse immediately. That's the difference.
Okay. All right, Peter. Sorry.
I love the timing. It's just it's just great timing. When I look at this from the prophetic viewpoint, it's like, yep, okay, this has to happen. And the time schedule that you laid out, I would totally agree with. Look for game-changing events in a positive way. I want to point this out, in a positive way, to happen, not this year. This year, we got to deal with the financial currency issue. But next year, 2015, there's a lot of significant events coming up, actually starting this April with the occult moons on Hebrew holidays, which lasts for 18 months. That's why I kind of put, guess what's going to happen at the end of 2015? We should see some spectacular things. Now, the other thing, right smack in the middle of 2015, Prince William turns 33 on the 21st of June at 2100 hours, 3 minutes. So, and as I understand, the prince has been acting in place of the queen, doing her knighting for her. So, if you've been knighted by the queen, it was actually Prince William who carried out the ceremony. So we have some interesting worldwide events happening right at the same time as we bring up this alien card, if you want to call it that, of disclosure. And Steve, I have to agree. Once this hits, the world is going to not know what to think unless it's managed properly, and it's going to be a game changer. It's going to bring on possibly peace and security. It could be it'll be a game changer no matter how it's managed. Every nation will have to handle it in their own way, and each nation will take a different approach. Eventually, some sort of more of an international structured response will have to develop. But again, this is the post-disclosure world. It's almost impossible to fully grasp and predict what can happen. It's just a huge thing. I can
get a sense of. I mean, I have a fairly good sense of what will happen in the very first day or two, the first week, and so forth. But a game changer it will be managed. The government manages everything one way or another.
Hold on, before we go down on the game changer, let's hold that thought because we got to take a break right here. Stay with us, folks. You're listening to World Watchers. Steve Bassett is our guest tonight. Game changers. What can we look forward to? Stay with us.
Our guest is Stephen Bassett. He's going to be with us for a little bit longer here. And Peter, I think you left off with a question, was it?
Yeah, well, kind of. We're looking at the changes that of all this occurring. It brings me back to Stanley Fulham, who wrote the book Challenges of Change. Now, some people may know Stanley, some people don't. He was a retired major from NORAD, and according to him, he had alien contact, and they told him that times were a-changing, that we were going to be in for a difficult situation, but then they would show up somewhere, guess what, in 2015, and meet with the United Nations and help us get our problems squared away. Will that actually happen? I don't know, but Stanley believed that it would. And unfortunately, about 2 months after I first learned of Stanley Fulham and recorded an interview on him, he died of advanced pancreatic cancer. So unfortunately, he's not around to talk to anymore. But, we're facing a situation in the financial field right now where the dollar is losing value every day. We're seeing problems where gold is being artificially suppressed and the dollar is being artificially inflated. There's no doubt there's problems. You don't believe so? Go to the supermarket and go buy some groceries. Your dollar isn't going to go near as far this week as it went last week. So it's in collapse. And it's a change. The Vatican's calling for a change in this fiat money system. Seeing as the Vatican's the mother of all corporations, I would expect something to happen. Now, mix this in with the whole financial situation that we're pretty much facing this year, and 2015 could be a time of reform if it's handled properly. That's why I say the timing I find fascinating with this. And so, Steve, based on the financial situation that we have in the world and what you're doing with disclosure, could you see things really improving? Can Congress really come forward and say, okay, yep, they're here, and this is what they've been telling us, or are they going to try to cover over the whole thing? It's kind of like covering over the elephant in the room right now. It's like, don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain.
Well, the strategy is Congress holds the hearings. They don't have to say anything. They just have to listen. The media will cover the hearings. That will generate enormous pressure on the White House, particularly if the media starts asking tough questions of these witnesses, as well as a number of other political figures that are easily in play. And the White House will be in a position where the whole thing's coming unraveled, and the president will have to cut a deal with the military intelligence groups that manage this. It'll be a secret deal, private deal, whatever. Basically saying, what do you need from me, and this is what I want from you, and they come to an understanding so that they can live with it, and then the president makes the announcement. This assumes the U.S. goes first, which I think was the idea all along, that the U.S. would be the one to end this, but that's no longer certainty by any means. Other nations will follow almost immediately, within days, one after another, like a ripple effect. So within a few weeks, I think every major nation in the world will have confirmed to their citizens the same thing. And then, we're in the post-disclosure world, and there's a lot of, the governments, there's a lot of people within governments that have known this is coming, and undoubtedly they have many thoughts on what to do and have made preparations. So there will be elements within governments which will have game plans that they'll try to implement right away. There, in the private sector, I'm sure that there are corporations that know disclosure is coming, and they will have game plans. The overall general public, of course, has been kept in a ghetto, an intellectual ghetto on this issue. And so the vast majority of the public does not have a game plan and is going to be in a state of confusion and uncertainty. There are people in the field, researchers and activists, that are fully aware that this is coming. And I'm giving a lot of thought to what we will do post-disclosure. But unlike the government, the corporations, we have virtually no financial resources, at least not now. That may change after disclosure. So it's an asymmetric situation without question. However, we do have one thing on our side. It's the leveler, and that is that whenever the big shots who know this is coming and have made contingency plans, whatever they attempt to do, the internet will be on it. And so the public does have an extremely powerful tool to follow and engage what the larger institutions attempt to do and say post-disclosure. And this is critical. So we can perhaps resist any nefarious strategies, mendacious strategies, and so forth, while we get our act together. And again, that's the internet. So one can make a case the internet was absolutely essential to having disclosure. Another reason why it couldn't happen until the 90s, I get it. But now that we've got 6-year-olds that can program their own computers, I think it's time to, okay, fine, we've got the internet, it's an important tool here, let's get disclosure and move on. So that's kind of the best thing I can say about how things will go early on. But the public is clearly going to be at a disadvantage initially.
Okay. No doubt. Now, the ex-defense minister, or liberal defense minister, as he's positioned, Paul Hellyer, came out and he said that on Russian TV that not only do aliens already walk among us, but they are refusing to share their advanced technologies until we change our warring and polluting ways. And this is according to UK Mail Online. So it's interesting. He's already started his disclosure project.
Paul is really working. He's really a trooper, and he's interviewing, and he's getting he's getting the key information out. He's getting into some speculative areas. We have, again, some information about a lot of things related to ETs, but because of the truth embargo, it's very difficult to really lock it down, right? I mean, somebody can say, well, there's 80 extraterrestrial species out there. Now, we don't know how many are out there, how many have engaged us. We don't have enough information to know that. We know there's more than one. So you're going to see a number of people like Paul are going to try to pass information on to the public, but there's still a lot of unknowns here. I mean, the fundamental message is extraterrestrials here, and that's what he's saying, and that's what, of course, what the public needs to hear. And he and a number of others are also going to throw out other information that's in play about this species, that species, where they're from, and so forth and so forth. But understand the ultimate sorting out of these kinds of this kind of information really can't be done properly until after disclosure, when government information starts to come out and the institutions are unleashed from the truth embargo to engage the vast subject matter and start working it up and getting it right. In other words, out of the ghetto and into the light. Universities, researchers, authors, media, going through all the information, sorting out what doesn't hold up, narrowing it down to the key, well-established facts, and then starting to build a complete picture of the entire history. This is a complex, difficult process that, of course, we've done many times in other areas. The governments have just deliberately prevented it from happening in this particular subject at this time. So that's where we're going forward. And again, I really appreciate what Paul is doing. I'm going to send him some talking points. I'd like to get him a little more focused. But and he's not the only one. There are other witnesses that are going to be coming forward. Other witnesses have come out years ago and basically said the fundamental truth. There's ETs here. And again, the truth embargo has prevented that from then being converted to public policy and transparency.
Well, one thing that I've noticed, and it's really picked up over the last 3 years, I mean, it's been out there for a while, but really, the last 3 years, virtually every TV documentary company has turned around and produced a tremendous amount of footage on ETs. Probably the one at the leader of the pack is the History Channel. It's like you can't get away from ancient aliens. You know, and that's pretty close to the truth, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. It depends on which civilization and which aliens we're talking about. But I've been looking at this, you know, and the documentaries were interesting to begin with. And it's like, yeah, okay, But it's like, man, my brain has been beat up. I can't even watch any of these shows anymore. And as soon as certain personalities come on, I got to change channel. It's like, yeah, okay, enough of that. There's so much information out there, whether it's 100% legitimate or just supposition. But the fact is that the meme is going out there that aliens are among us. Aliens are here. Aliens have been here for eons. If I had to rename the Bible, I would rename it 6,000 Years of Alien Intervention in Human History.
I get your point. Here's the equation is actually fairly simple in some respects. The 20th century developed and saw the rise of democracy and more representative governments, more open governments, and the people had access to more and more information. It also saw the explosion of new media, from radio to television, movies, computers, and on and on and on and on. And so, not surprisingly, unless the democratic nations wanted to convert to totalitarianism, the citizens of these nations, and we know the ones we're talking about, we're going to get access to more and more and more information, which is true. They have. It's everywhere. It's all over the place. But at the same time, these developed democracies, and I'm talking about the United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, France, Italy, and so forth, were locked into a truth embargo started by the U.S. as a policy that they couldn't acknowledge the truth behind all this information. And so that's the point two. That's the second part of the equation. The third part of the equation is simple. Under those circumstances, when you have, and you're going to continue, you're not going to have a coup and overthrow the elected governments and institute a fascist totalitarian state. You're in a situation where your citizens are getting more and more and more and more information about something the government says doesn't exist. Now, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is that trust in government, respect for government, is going to just be eroded every single day. And so I would make the case that the entire truth embargo with respect to extraterrestrial has played a huge part in minimally, subconsciously eroding trust in the social contracts in government. This massive lie that every year more and more people recognize as a lie. That's not just happens and then you move on, but it's continuing, ongoing, decade after decade after decade. It has done a great deal to put us where we are today, where government is profoundly dysfunctional. Gentlemen, I appreciate the time. I have a meeting that I've now got to go to, but glad to come back for this update. Naturally, I want to come back when we're ready to launch this the citizen hearing, so that all your listeners can get the info on how to get in touch with their members of Congress and so forth.
All right. Well, Stephen, that's perfect timing because we've got another guest coming up in about another 10 minutes. So I thank you for joining us and keeping us updated, and certainly appreciate all your efforts.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until the next time.
I think the timing is fantastic. Have a great evening and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again. All right, everybody. That was Steve Bassett. And
over the debt ceiling. It will be over by the 7th. There's no way they're going to go past that date. And that means things will settle down. and that's when we launch. So the timing has worked out beautifully. What we're going to do is simply this. We will ship off a complete DVD set of the proceedings, all 30 hours, 10 DVDs approximately, in a nice box set. We'll ship one to every office on the Hill, all 535. Plus, we're going to send one to 100 ambassadors to the UN and 100 ambassadors to the United States. A few days after that, I'm going to be doing national media, national radio, and
Stephen, welcome back to World Watchers.
good to be with you.
Well,
Hello, Stephen.
It's great.
You got me? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes, sir.
absolutely.
You sound good.
Great.
Last time we had you
Good to be
on,
with
we
you.
broke up pretty bad, and I'm sorry about that. But it's great to have you here tonight. And so tell us a little bit about the progress that you've been having.
Well, the next step in the advocacy work, which aims to finally put the government in a position where they have to tell the people the truth about the ET presence, is the Congressional Hearing Initiative. It's a big deal. And it's only possible because of the citizen hearing on disclosure, which we held last May and filmed all 30 hours of it. As a result, we have a calling card, an unprecedented calling card. And so the question was, all right, when do we use this card? And when do I go back to on Capitol Hill for the first time in really 13 years for direct engagement of members and their staff on this issue? Right now, the game plan is February 10, 11, 12, right around there, to launch this Congressional Hearing Initiative. I was wanting to do it last November, even December, but it proved to be a good thing that we did not attempt to go ahead. We really couldn't, but it worked out fine because, as most, I think, of your listeners recall, the Congress had a nervous breakdown through all of, December, certainly, November, all of November, over the debt ceiling and the budget. So they set new dates to reconsider and go around again, and they've already passed the budget. And the debt ceiling date is for February 7th. So whatever foo-fa is going to take place between the two parties on the Hill, and calling on everyone who hears my voice to send an email and multiple tweets to their two senators and congressperson, their senators, just those three, asking that they look for those DVDs and look at them, and also meet with me about congressional hearings for the witnesses ready to testify. So in the days leading up to those arriving in their offices, they will be getting all these emails and tweets, sort of letting them know these DVDs are coming. And then they'll continue to get those contacts after the DVDs have arrived, which will help to ensure that staffers in some of these offices look at some of this material. Shortly after that, I will come